Hey everyone, welcome back to LA Not So Confidential. This is Dr. Shiloh, and I'm reporting from my closet. Here, not with me, but with me is
Dr. Scott. Hey, I am surrounded by pillows in a makeshift studio since we don't have our usual recording area. What were you saying earlier? We were trying the app out, and you were saying that there's probably going to be a lot of podcasts this week
that just sound unusual, not like their normal location for sure.
Right.
Nope. So it's been a few weeks since our last recording, and things have really ramped up with COVID-19. Scott and I are continuing to work, so our lives don't feel as different as a lot of people's out there, I'm sure, but I know that's keeping me sane a little bit, being able to go to work.
Oh, I could not agree more. Oh my gosh. In fact, I get more of a sense of normalcy being there in the office, and it's really rough on people. I mean, this is a huge phenomenon happening right now, and we hope everybody's okay, and we may try and get back to you even in a couple of days with a little bit more on how to take care of yourself if we can. But,
I actually thought, do you have just maybe a tip? Maybe we could each offer like a tip at the top of the show about, how people can take care of themselves or lower their anxiety a little bit or stay connected.
Absolutely. You know what? Without going too deep into it, there's a really, really great list of self-care routines that was posted by a psychologist recently, and I'm going to post the whole link to it on our show notes and on the website. But look, and it's a list of a number of things that are all very helpful, but it was so well written, and I was really happy to see that the number one thing, which I completely agree with, is continuing your sense of normalcy by having a routine. You guys, everybody listening, all y'all out there, you have to have a routine within your quarantine and within your you're safe and secure staying home. You've just got to. And, that may be hard for some people. Some people may have more of a challenge by being, more athletically inclined or more action oriented and extroverted. So whether you fall on that spectrum or someplace else, you've got to keep a routine. And I mean, just don't stay in your sweats all day. Get up, shower, put on clothes as if you're going to work or you're going out to meet someone, and, schedule your day, break it up in 45-minute segments. And that will help you. That will really, really help your emotional health. What do you think, Shiloh?
Yeah, I think that's great. I would also say the same when you're dealing with kids. Last week was hard. I telecommuted one day and I had to do my work, but I also had to make sure my kid was getting her work done. And it was bananas. I was like, send me back to my office. Let someone else do this. It was really hard. So I know people are struggling with structure and a schedule with their kids, which it probably sounds so crazy to people without kids. Like, how could you not have that? But when you're living it and it's just, you're thrown into it and you're forced to do it and it's different. And you're trying to essentially so I think the struggle for me is I have an only child. So it's sort of like keeping her entertained and making sure she's doing what she's supposed to be doing. People with multiple kids have their challenges. I have a client I was talking to last week who has 4 kids. So they got like 4 workstations in the house. They're all in different grades. And I can't even imagine what that's like, trying to keep them on top of their homework, letting them have breaks, all of that. So it's, I think same thing for yourself, for your kids, but also do it within reason and do what works for your family and what's realistic. Don't try to shoot to some crazy high expectation, because we don't need any more pressure on ourselves. This is not the time to be championing for Mother of the Year,
I agree.
Do the best you can and try to implement some of these things, the self-care stuff, the exercise, taking care of your mindfulness and just being present and maybe trying to help others, just little chunks. The way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So
Yeah.
we will all get through this. It's a mindset plus some planning involved, and then we'll come out on this other side. Okay.
I agree. And we'll post some more tips, but less pressure is better. So, trying to think that you're going to be parent of the year or grandparent of the year by following this strict homeschooling routine to hit all the points, I just don't think that's realistic, especially because this is such a jarring adjustment that our entire society is being asked to make. So go easy on yourself. Please go easy on yourself, and let's all try and be kind.
I love that. At the end of the day, that's it. If that's all you can manage that day, cool. Good.
Yeah. But let me tell you, I think there's going to be a newfound respect and admiration for what educators do in this country. And that's been a long time coming. I think we've been slipping away for 30 years now away from really respecting our educators. I
agree.
And I have a complete bias. My mom was an elementary school teacher for 35 years. Both of my sisters have been elementary school teachers. I mean, I have nothing but admiration for what they do. And I think the rest of the country should as well.
Yeah, I saw a meme today that said a bunch of you parents out there are starting to figure out it's not your teacher that's the problem.
Exactly.
Your kid's teacher.
Exactly.
So have you been watching anything interesting while you've been spending more time at home?
What did the big phenomenon right now is the Tiger King. And I have not watched it yet because it just it looks so crazy. I'm just like, do I really want this? But I'll probably die. I'll probably die.
I'm about halfway through. It is my new name for you because for our listeners, Dr. Scott loves tigers.
I do. I absolutely do. I was born in Year of the Tiger, so
he's born Year of the Tiger. He loves tigers. He's more of a Tigger than a Tiger King. But
yeah.
But it is crazy. I'm taking it in small doses. I actually started off not watching any true crime stuff when all of this, pandemic came down because I really didn't want to overwhelm myself at the first onset. So I caught up on Schitt's Creek, and now I'm diving back into the crazy a little bit. But
yeah,
it's pretty nuts. That's for sure.
Well, that's interesting. That kind of loops around a little bit back to what we opened with, is about, I think that right now everyone's diet on a number of levels should be careful. I need to be careful with carbs. And on the upside, I found out I can make really good biscuits, almost as good as my mom's. The downside is, oh shit, I can make biscuits.
I can make really good biscuits.
Yeah. And God knows we don't need that many carbs in captivity. But the other thing is about, thinking about your diet. You need to think about your emotional diet and what you're taking in. And, those of us that are fascinated by the realm of true crime, it's an interesting diet. And I think that we all have an amazing level of resiliency and interest and fascination with this topic, that in the day-to-day normal running of the world, that's okay. We process it. But maybe if you're isolated and, you don't have a lot of socialization during this quarantine period, maybe you need to kind of mix it up a little bit with some lighthearted comedies or nature documentaries or something.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And that, we actually had all of April planned out pretty well.
Oh my gosh.
Went down the tubes because, so at the end of the month, we were going to do our big Disney crime episode leading up to CrimeCon. And now that's been postponed to October. So we want to save that and still do that right before CrimeCon happens. But we were also going to bring you something different at the beginning of this month. And we just thought with the climate, we wanted to keep it a little light for today. So yeah, that kind of moving into our topic. How did you even, because I know you sent me an article. You were like, we need to do this. And we're like, let's do something light and funny. But also just as interesting. So.
Yeah. And once again, it turns into being a subject that is just bananas and goes a lot deeper than I expected. So basically, we're talking about mystery poopers, and
Yes.
that is the unbelievable number of bordering on illegal and bordering on emotionally driven uses of fecal elimination as revenge, as weapon, in anger, in retaliation. And we've got some just kind of fascinating stuff to talk about today.
Yeah, and we're not talking about the one-offs or people with medical issues. We're going to try and stay away from that, but you have to ask why when you see some of these, and some of them that are a mystery, that the person wasn't found or caught. We don't know why. And it just like any other crime, we always want to know, like, what is with someone who's
Right.
doing whatever behavior. We're not going to go for a gross out factor in this. We're going to try and stay on track and be as clinical as possible, but some of it is pretty hilarious.
Yeah, and some of it is a little bit unavoidable. There's a couple of that are just jarringly
disturbing.
Yeah, like I couldn't even find the word. But since you started out with that, one of the things I would want to say is that we're going to be talking about some of these cases of people who have actually been taken into the legal system and charged with various crimes due to their defecating in public chronically and regularly. Okay, so we're not talking about, like Charlotte was saying, we're not talking about the one-offs, but there are medical conditions that have been used in attempts at providing a defense for these individuals, and those defenses did not work very well because the people ended up, of course, not meeting the criteria for those medical conditions. And those medical conditions are really serious. I mean, as much as people want to sometimes make IBS, which is also known as irritable bowel syndrome, into a joke, it's not a joke. For people who have it, it is incredibly life altering because everything revolves around, okay, can I go on this vacation and go hiking because I've got to be able to go to the bathroom when I got to go to the bathroom? And then,
so it is as serious as it shows in the commercials.
It is. I mean, it is. And people I think that people, and I've had classmates with it. I mean, and there's also another version that's even more serious, which is called Crohn's disease. And Crohn's is brutal, and it's an autoimmune disorder, but it probably has a genetic factor, and there's a lot of conflicting information about it. And it is unbelievably debilitating. And I've had 2 colleagues that have had it, and their lives completely revolve around these medical conditions. So we're not making any sort of intimation in the examples that we're going to give, because these do not fit the criteria of those medical conditions. They were attempted a couple of times to be used as defense in legal proceedings, but that's not what's going on here.
Yeah.
And for anybody who out there who's a listener who may have gastric issues such as we're talking about, like I feel for you, because 2 of my closest colleagues and a classmate struggled with this for years. And, it's just jaw dropping when you realize that someone who presents as not having any issues and has a smile on their face, and you realize they've been carrying this burden for years. It's amazing.
Yeah. To have your day, every day, like you said, revolve around that and the worry that comes with it, I'm sure.
Well, and anxiety plays a huge role in IBS and in Crohn's. So yeah, worrying about whether or not you're going to be able to stay continent. So, but that being said,
so most cities have ordinances against public urination or defecation. I'm sure all of us have urinated in public when we've really had to go, or we were intoxicated or something. This is not we've found instances that fall outside of those realms of what someone from the general population may have participated in at some point. So I'm going to start off with the jogging pooper from Colorado. So I think this was actually the article that you sent me initially, and you were like, whoa, what is this? We need to do an episode. What is happening here? So this is in June of 2017. in Colorado. And this woman ended up being dubbed the Mad Pooper. So she is a jogger who jogs in this neighborhood and essentially was caught defecating in the yard of a family residence. And some children saw her. And so the female homeowner comes out and confronts her. And she was astounded. She was like, "Are you serious? Are you really taking a poop right here in front of my kids?" And the woman was like, "Yeah, sorry," and gets up and jogs off. And I mean, she's in her full jogging gear, like she is out for a run. And so the homeowner was like, "Okay, like she's got to be terribly embarrassed. I'm sure she will like never be seen in this neighborhood again."
And she'll come back and clean up what she just did.
Or yeah,
that's what the assumption was.
Exactly. But no, she did not come back to clean up, and they caught her 2 other times, but a total of 7 times they found human excrement right there in the yard, and they were able to catch her on camera. So there's images of her in her jogging gear, and the poor homeowner, I mean, she even put up a sign to the woman who keeps pooping in our yard, "Please stop. My children are here. They're able to see you out the window." It was just really odd. And they actually never found out who she was, even with the video or the still images being put up on the internet, the police getting involved. So it was kind of this big mystery. And then a man ended up uploading a YouTube video acting as a spokesperson for this woman, saying that she apologized for her behavior, that she suffers from a traumatic brain injury that causes her to lose her bowels, which I've never heard of a TBI doing that. And then all of a sudden there was another video that he uploaded saying that he really didn't represent her, that it was all just a spoof that he had put together. So this one actually remains a mystery. They do not know who she is.
Yeah, which is really fascinating because those images are actually pretty clear.
They're good.
The pictures. It's interesting because she's the Mad Pooper. She has her own Wikipedia page that has a lot of information. One of the things that's really interesting is that there were people that were trying to use the IBS and Crohn's defense, which really, if you can tell by looking at this woman's physicality that she is either a legit long distance runner because she's very, very slender and very cut.
Yeah, she has a runner's body.
And there's literature out there about long distance runners who are like, look, in order to do this sport, I have to feed myself and I have to have fuel in my system. And then I go for a very long run. That is going to speed up the peristalsis, which is the movement of the fecal matter through the system. And I may have to use the bathroom. Now, in this case with the Mad Pooper, it was noted by the police that there were several public restrooms in that area, because it was around a park area. So this woman, like we were talking about, because this is the intersection of the legal system and psychology, is she was doing this for a reason. There was a motivation, either a motivation or a lack of insight or a lack of caring at all. It's like, I'm going to do what I want to do and I'm going to do it right here. Or that, and there's a lot in the sort of this scatological psychology study, and there is some study in this area that, some researchers go, it's a way of sort of throwing the finger up at the world and saying, I'm standing in shit, you have to stand in shit too. It's a way of getting back.
Yeah, I think there was even the homeowner said that she had brought her own napkins with her. So either she knew she was going to have to go, like you were talking about, but there is something to, if you're a long distance runner and you have possibly either IBS or you're going to have to go at some point, then you plan your route accordingly.
Right.
And however long it takes you to drop your pants in front of someone's yard, you can drop your pants in a public restroom at a park, and it's not going to cut into your run. So yeah, there's definitely something else going on here. It the brazenness, to know that in this day and age, people are going to have their cameras out there's going to be surveillance videos with another one I'm going to talk about. It's kind of crazy to me that she has the audacity to do this, and it's really interesting to sort of speculate why she might be doing it. So
yeah, I mean, I know that the mom in the residence there was particularly concerned because the woman was so brazen about it, and there's been conjecture that it may also sort of bleed over into a sense of exhibitionism.
yes, I was thinking that too.
Because she was, the children did see her fully nude from the waist down as she was eliminating.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's exposure. And especially given the fact that there were these other receptacles and other toilets in the area that she could have used. So, yeah, something definitely is going on there. I'm just still astounded that she was never identified. Like, that's astounding to me.
Same. I kept waiting. I'm like, am I missing something? Am I not finding the article where they identified her? Because I'm like, my research doesn't feel complete here. But yeah, I guess she got away with it. Okay, but she stopped eventually. So
yeah, or she interesting. I wonder if she moved. I wonder if she went to a different location or literally just like moved to a completely different community.
I don't know. Yeah, because even if she hunkered down or her family didn't bring forth, her identity, you would think that someone would recognize her in that town. But I don't know. Maybe she was just passing through.
Could be.
Okay, so this one, there's not a ton of information about this case out of New Jersey from May of 2018, but this one's interesting just because of the location and the guy's profession. So at Homedale High School, near the track where all the track and field sports take place, coaches ended up alerting police because they were finding that on a regular basis there was human feces found near the track every single day. And you think, okay, is this a rival high school? Is this some sort of school prank? Is it a student? Like, what is going on here? And the cops take it seriously enough that they end up setting up surveillance, which I think is just sort of hilarious to think about. Like, if that had been my job when I was a cop, like, hey, can you go sit out on this field at 5 a.m. to see if someone's pooping?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, okay, yeah, sure. But sure enough, I mean, the cops are out there and they caught a man in the act of pooping near the track, and they confront him and arrest him. And it turns out he is a school superintendent. So the superintendent is like the principal of all the school district in different areas. So he is like the head honcho guy who lived about 3 miles away, and he would go there to run on the track. And so they ended up charging him. They charged him with lewdness. They charged him with littering and defecating in public. And, it's like, here's a guy that's so closely linked to the school system and doing this every day. I don't know. There's very little information. So, of course, my mind just kind of goes wild with speculation. But I thought, this guy is not happy in his job. There's something that's, like you said, a big like F you to make a statement here.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to talk about the whys a little bit later. But I don't know. Did he have a beef with someone at this particular school? I need to know more.
Yeah, there's an amazing lack of information about the precipitating event that is disturbing. And I think that probably because he was able to reverse course later when it went to trial, because the officers. So there's a couple of things that happened. First, he is a not a principal. He's a superintendent, but he's a superintendent from another district. So he wasn't even pooping on within his district. He was like, "Oh, if I'm going to do this, then I'm going to go do it someplace else," which I think is very interesting from a sort of a criminogenic standpoint. Of I'm going to go soil someplace, but I'm not going to. It's like the old saying,
don't shit
where you eat, right? So it's interesting that like a lot of his elimination was done under the bleachers. So, you can kind of conjecture about that. Like, was it because he was trying to hide it, or was he trying to hide it but where people would smell it? Because human feces actually is quite odorous compared to and more foul odorous than a lot of farm animals. Which is very interesting, just because of the nature of our diets. But they turned all this around because they charged him, but there was controversy about his mugshot because he wasn't actually arrested; he was just cited. So they took a mugshot, but then they didn't follow through with the arrest, and someone leaked his mugshot to the media. So now he has a huge lawsuit against that arresting entity. And so he's claiming he did a federal lawsuit on September 9th, claiming negligent and intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, negligent hiring, training, and supervision, and that he wanted to also duplicate these charges in state court as well as federal, and it got thrown out by a federal judge. Wow. So yeah, there's something going on like that's another one, like where we talk about impulsivity. I mean, this guy was making $150,000 a year.
Yep.
So the idea that you would like take such a risk is really kind of astounding. And I kind of almost draw a parallel between like law enforcement and the use of alcohol. Like if you're a cop, you don't drink and drive. You just that it's career ending, especially out here in California. I mean, it'll ruin your career completely. And, so the idea that this sort of upstanding school superintendent would do something that's so sort of almost like a toddler.
It's just so taboo. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the one thing that sort of gets me to give him the benefit of the doubt is he's going for a run at, 5 every morning. It's the school closest to his house. Well, actually, I don't know if it's the closest to his house, 3 miles away. It could be the closest track.
True.
Again, like if he has his morning coffee before he leaves and goes and runs, he may actually just have to go to the bathroom, but it comes back to planning. Like, okay, then maybe you don't run at that time, or maybe you need to alter your exercise routine because it's not worth the risk.
Planning. Take a paint bucket with a plastic bag. I mean,
there you
go.
Campers
do. Like there's a lot. There's so many options that are available for you to use your executive functioning and work your way through this challenge. And none of those were used.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I want to touch on just really the most recent one that I think is really interesting because it does use defense, but it's got some elements in there that make us think that it's probably not accurate. So I actually heard about this one on the Florida Men podcast very recently, and I was like, oh, Scott and I are going to talk about this. But this happened in Ashland, Massachusetts in January of this year. And there's an outdoors goods store there called Natic Outdoor Store. And essentially the manager put up surveillance cameras to catch shoplifters. But after he had done that, he noticed in like the same little corner of the parking lot that there was human excrement day after day, week after week. And he ends up looking at the surveillance footage, and about 9 times within 3 months, the same woman drives up in her Lincoln SUV, pulls into this part of the parking lot. It doesn't matter if it's raining. She did it when it was snowing. They showed the surveillance footage. Nice weather. But basically, she opens her driver's door and then she opens the door on the driver's side, but in the back. So she puts them together like in this little triangle that's covering her and squats right down by her driver's door opening, goes to the bathroom, brings toilet paper, wipes herself and leaves the toilet paper on top of the pile and then drives off. So they were finding these piles of poop with toilet paper sitting neatly on top. Again, they get the cops involved. There's a sting operation. And eventually she was caught in the act. Honestly, her mugshot is like the saddest thing I've ever seen.
It's so sad. It is so
sad. She is bawling. So she also claims that she has IBS and that she takes a laxative. Turns out she's a nanny and she lives just up the street, like a couple of blocks away from this outdoor store. And so there again, even though it's early in the morning, we're seeing that she has a place that she can go and use the restroom at her place of employment. So again, it's another one that I'm just like, what is this about? And God, she looks so sad and awful in the picture. But
okay, so I
don't know.
I love that, because I want to be compassionate, and I love that we're, trying to be understanding about this, but there's still things that don't add up in a very interesting way. So, you can use laxatives if your form of IBS is constipation,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not how you use them. Like, I mean, this could be like if that, I mean, they also found them in the car, like they were in the car with her. I think about like that sort of jarring few scenes from the movie The Help, which takes place in the South. Where white families would employ Black women as housekeepers. And there was just such a controversy, especially one character who did not want her Black housekeeper using her private bathroom, which is just horrifically racist and awful. And,
sure.
I was wondering, now let's say we don't know if this is a high-end community. Maybe she's going into a woman's home and she doesn't want to have like diarrhea, or she doesn't, like she's concerned about how she's going to present and she doesn't want to kind of blow up somebody's bathroom when she gets there. I can kind of understand that.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, so I'm trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, it's like, you only live a few blocks away. Adjust your time frame here and take care of it before you leave. Or again, like the camper, put a bucket down, take it off. It's interesting because I hike every year up in the Smokies, and they really drill it into your head. It's like, no, if you're going to use the bathroom, you take it out. You don't leave it on the trail because it's so toxic to the environment. Now, I mean, not everybody's an outdoor person, so I understand that. But still, once again, it's just like this weird. I would love to know what's going through her head, what the reasoning is. It doesn't feel like a fuck you to that parking lot or that store. Does it feel like that to you?
No, it doesn't. But I also like, I gave all those sort of options a thought too. Maybe the family she works for is terrible and there is some sort of like, strict image to keep up or something like that, even though we all use the restroom. So we all should be super understanding about it. And then I was like, okay, well, was she 51?
Yes.
Okay. So she's 51. She's a nanny. She drives a fairly brand new, very nice Lincoln SUV. I'm just trying to put pieces together and I'm like, what is this saying to me? And I really couldn't come up with anything.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I don't know what it is. Once they showed, because I watched video, and once they showed actually the surveillance cameras, they are so obvious on the building, which is like she parked in the same spot where you could not get her car more centered into the surveillance footage too. I don't know if she's going to be closing her doors around her to make a little fort. I don't know how she would not have been aware of the surveillance videos too. So that makes me think, was that the whole point?
Yeah, it sounds like that sort of, once again, coming back to this idea of impulsivity and really sort of, sort of primal pushing back against inhibition, that it's an act, that's an act of defiance is what it feels like in some way. And maybe not even in a way that she's aware, but, that could be happening.
True.
So we are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with our next section, okay? Welcome back, folks. So this is part 2 of the Mystery Pooper episode. I never thought I'd be saying those words. Did you?
I think I'm going to title this Shitstorm 2020.
Right. Because there's a real shitstorm happening, right?
There's a real shitstorm, and we're talking a lot of shit today.
Right, exactly. So I wanted to take this section and talk about a couple of examples that are, along, other examples that are on this spectrum of this phenomenon, which is so interesting and funny and weird. But a few years ago, when I was a law enforcement psychologist, I did a training with a career law enforcement individual who's also former military and is also a psychologist. His name is Kevin Gilmartin, and he wrote a really, really well-known book called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, a guide for officers and their families. And, his goal in writing the book was to help officers and their families in maintaining or improving their quality of life, both professionally and personally.
It's wonderful.
It's really fantastic. And I would say, if you're into true crime, folks, go buy this book on Amazon. It's a slim volume. It's a quick read. It's also just amazing. It's like it's so great because he breaks down the process of hypervigilance and anxiety and depression in people who are high sensation seeking individuals. And I think everybody can benefit from reading it. Even if you don't personally, then understanding this genre of which we're all a part will be, a result of reading that book. So he's an amazing writer and he's an amazing presenter, and he's, created kind of an amazing career out of himself, and law enforcement really respect him. He's got this incredible background. So he does a day-long training that is sort of diving deeper into some of the chapters from his book. And he gives some really great examples, these anecdotes that are not included in the book. And one of them stuck with me because, it's such a great example of another kind of motivation for engaging this kind of behavior that is a lot more understandable. And so he gives an example of a law enforcement agency somewhere in the U.S. And I won't identify it because it's his story to tell, and who knows what will happen. I'll just kind of get the gist of it. But there's like a relatively mid-size law enforcement agency in a mid-size town in sort of the American Southwest. So they get a new captain who comes in, and the captain comes in from a completely different agency and is going to do things in a completely different way. And so that's always going to shake things up. You as law enforcement would agree, right, Shiloh?
Oh my gosh. It is such a weird thing to have an outsider come into one of those positions like chief or captain or high ranking. And a lot of times agencies go outside because stuff is not going well within the department.
Exactly.
Therefore, they're hoping for some change and a shakeup, but it is a tough pill to swallow for people who work there.
Right, because it could be a matter of that maybe there was some sort of either corruption or there was something not happening the way it should happen. Or it could be just like, hey, we're ready for a change and we want to move up with the times. And so that shakes up the status quo. And, that is not always a bad thing. In fact, a lot of times shaking up the status quo is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of jostling people out of their comfort zone. So apparently there's this whole line of events where the guy is like kind of the new head is laying down the law and saying, we're going to get back to basics. We're going to get back to this and that. And actually, it is kind of important to know that this is in the American Southwest so that you understand that the summers are very, very hot. So,
God.
Right.
A little foreshadowing there for you.
Right. Well, so, what happens is there's a lot of resistance to this individual. And he apparently is just this ultimate professional. And really, he's like, he's getting a lot of pushback, but he's professional and tries to address it, but doesn't really, he's unfazed by all the pushback. Mm-hmm. So most of the law enforcement members just begrudgingly sort of start pulling in line. And there were, except for two individuals who I guess were probably in a relationship where they kind of egged each other on, and they were drinking buddies. I think they had been beat partners. So they would just sort of ramp themselves up in their anger against this guy. And, who is he to tell us what to do? The ultimate change in policy, as strange as it sounds, is the new captain says, oh, and by the way, everybody's wearing their hats now. So that's a phenomenon that I was not aware of until I got into working with law enforcement, is that although the standard issue uniform hat for law enforcement is required, there are some agencies that are not as strict as others about, like, every time you get out of the car, that hat goes on your head.
Right. Usually it's saved for what they say is Class A uniforms, which is like if you're going to be at a promotion ceremony, if you're going to be at a funeral, if you're going to be at something very, very important, you're wearing the full uniform with the hat, with the tie and the tie bar, and looking your best and your sharpest. Some agencies also require that you wear them in high visibility type of jobs where it also is maybe a little bit more community service related, depending. But the agency, the chief or the captain can say, yeah, this is your uniform. You're wearing this every single day.
Yeah, it's his call.
Sure.
Right. I mean, and I do know that, like, I've seen in several of the agencies here in Southern California, even that some of the hats are made from that dark mesh, that so it looks like it's a solid, but it actually, blocks sun and allows for air circulation. I mean, there's a lot of, sort of new materials being used. But so these two guys were pissed off. No, we're going to have to do this. So one of them gets the idea of, like, well, we'll show him. We'll break into his office and take a dump in his hat. So They work out this entire plan for breaking into the station, or, being in the station, during a shift when there's very little oversight, gaining access to this man's office, and, I guess either squatting on the floor or on his desk and, relieving themselves on the hat and then leaving it right on his desk as a statement. And so they follow through with it. They actually do it. Of course, they did not think all of this through, because it was clear who had done it, because, as they started interviewing people of, like, well, if somebody was going to do this, who would do it? And they all, like, basically turned and pointed fingers at these two guys.
Yeah, I'm guessing they weren't real good at keeping their mouths shut and not being the two obvious people who were talking the most shit.
Absolutely, right? Like, they probably have, this is something that is probably pretty indicative of their baseline characterological makeup.
Yeah.
So, which is sort of booting authority, which, and you working in law enforcement. I mean, I work with the law enforcement I work with seem to me to be the cream of the crop. I work with like just amazing people. So these two guys are caught and they're charged, or they're not. I think they didn't charge them, but what they did was
discipline.
They were completely fired. Like, so they lost, they were both pushing 20 years, near retirement. They lost everything.
Oh,
so, stupid. Just for a stupid like show of bucking authority. And so here's an example of two people doing it as revenge, or to feel like that they were justified in sort of pissing on authority or shitting on authority, as it were. And it's like this from a psych perspective, it's very primitive. What waste represents is what is used and foul leaving our bodies. And I'm going to use this as a statement to show you what I think of you.
And also sort of this marking your territory piece to it too. Like, how Absolutely. Dare you come into our play? How the hell do these guys go home and explain to their wives that they just lost their jobs for this?
Exactly.
Oh my God.
It's hard to wrap your mind around. It's really hard to wrap your mind around. And then apparently, like the capper to the story that Gil Martin was presenting is that, like, within I think 4 or 5 months of them getting fired, the captain leaves and he gets another job someplace else and takes off, and it goes back to the policy that it was before of just, you can wear your hat when you want to, or you wear it for the big presentations, but you don't have to put it on every time you get out of the car. So if these guys had just held on another few months, it all would have resolved itself. It's very interesting to me.
Yes.
So a short example of one that happened a few years ago is they were trying in Manhattan and New York to adapt the movie Magic Mike, which is stars Channing Tatum and is about male exotic dancers. They were going to adapt it into a Broadway musical, and there was a pooper going to the auditions, and on 3 different occasions on stage, dancers would be walking in and go, thinking that it was dog excrement, but then what's happened here? And it was all kind of kept lighthearted and funny, but likely what it was, and they never found the person who was doing this, but it was likely as a result of a grudge regarding not allowing non-union dancers to audition. So for those of you that are not familiar with how it works in entertainment, is we have major unions that protect the rights and protect the abilities to negotiate of performers who are going into shows, whether it's a live stage show, or it's a touring show, or a movie, or a television show. You have these rules that are enforced by the union. But as a result, it's like you have to work very hard to get into the union. And, it's sometimes very hard to get into the union because those jobs are protected. So this was thought of as like a protest of like, I'm gonna, really crap on everybody's audition because I don't have the chance to get in there. So the person was never identified.
It could have been more than one person too, don't you think?
I never thought about
like a group of people, maybe, kind of. I don't know. It's pretty funny though. I love. So did you watch some of the YouTube videos?
Like a pooping flash mob, right?
Yeah, right.
Oh,
but of course,
the videos are great. You have to describe those.
So funny. So of course, here we're talking about like incredibly talented people, and what are they going to do with it? They're gonna make art out of it. So there is like some funny sort of musical parodies about what's going on, and then the Law and Order SPU, Special Pooping Unit spoofs that they do are great. I have them. I'll link them, or we'll put them on our Facebook page. But they're really well done. They're filled with tons of double entendres and puns about flushing out the severity of crime. And it's very clever and just like such theater people fun.
Yeah. I mean, I've said it before, but there's nothing like, it's one of the things about my former career when working with dancers is there's not a funnier group of people than dancers.
Yeah. Totally. So we'll link those for sure.
Yeah. So now moving on to another example that is really, where we really get into a legitimate underpinning of a mental illness is regarding a case that occurred in Canada in 2019. And if you'll notice, folks, like we're not using names. Like,
right, exactly.
It's just not necessary. It's not necessary to identify these people by name for whatever reason, whether it is acting out of anger, or mental illness or a medical condition, if that's the underpinning. These are just interesting cases, kind of understanding what was the motivation for why they happened, but we're avoiding that for this particular episode. But this was a 23-year-old Canadian college campus gasser is what we call it. We're going to talk about terms in a couple of seconds. But this is in 2019, there was an individual who was arrested after 5 incidents of dumping liquefied human excrement in a bucket on women on a campus. And he was finally identified after they put together looking at all of the surveillance equipment. And people were terrified. Like the first time it happened to someone, it hit this individual who walked into the library and was completely in disbelief. Like they were just covered from head to toe. And
that's horrific.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Shitting in someone's yard is one thing, but do not touch me with your excrement.
Well, it's also like from a health perspective, it's incredibly dangerous. It's actually really, really dangerous. And we'll talk about that in a second. And, there's literally no information on this guy. There was a radio show in Canada that was able to interview an individual who allegedly was a high school friend. And this guy sounded very normal. And he said, I knew him and he was a normal, laid back guy. He had a great sense of humor. So it's really hard for me to understand that this is the person who's doing this, but it clearly is him because all of us that hung out together were texting each other of, oh my gosh, look who's they caught doing this.
Yeah.
So this is an individual who was an immigrant. He had no known history of mental illness, but it was clearly indicated in his defense by his defense attorney. One thing that's very interesting that does really support sort of the mental health underpinnings is that, it is such an over-the-top action. I mean, these were buckets. Yeah. I mean, where do people get buckets of human excrement? Did he, it's like it was planned. If you look at the image of him, he's wearing like a beanie and gloves. He's wearing some protective clothing, but in most of the pictures, while he's engaging in this behavior, he has like this massive, almost manic looking smile on his face. Like it is just, it's very reminiscent to me of when I've done interviews with people who were altered in their state, either through bipolar mania or psychosis, and they were clearly experiencing what we call internal preoccupation or internal stimulation. So, I look at the picture of this guy and I'm like, he looks like someone who's hearing voices, like that are directing him to do this. But, clearly from a mental health perspective, someone who would engage in this sort of, it might have been, there was a sort of a hypothesis that it might have been retaliatory, that he might have been, because all the victims were women. So maybe he had not, gotten the attention from women that he thought he should have gotten. But then as more and more information came out, he clearly indicated that, he had fallen very far. This is someone who had been successful in high school and successful in college, but did not, after that, just fell apart. He was living in a homeless shelter and had, his ADLs had gone down. So his grooming and hygiene were starting to look pretty bad.
So definitely that classic, like college age psychotic break probably happening here.
Absolutely. We've talked about that before, as, any individual who has a genetic predisposition towards a severe mental illness on the bipolar or the psychotic spectrum, it is really, their biggest enemy is stressful events. And especially if there's no huge amount of symptomology prior to that, and the family doesn't know, or the people, the support system doesn't really see any indication of that, then they go away to college and they experience all this incredibly high level of stress that then pushes them over into a full-blown episode. And it looks like this might have been what happened. I mean, what was amazing, it was such a big deal, or people showed up in his courtroom for his appearance did for the serial killer Bruce McArthur. So that thing is like, and people were kind of tittering about it. I'm sure the victims weren't, because of course, 5 young women being targeted with human waste is pretty brutal. Otherwise the guy's sort of an enigma, and the entire case has been it's just sort of disappeared. And with his defense attorney saying he needs to be in a hospital, he has mental health issues, and prison is not where this individual needs to go. But
so those two cases were happening in Canada at the same time? Is that what you're saying? Or okay,
sort of within the same amount of time. Yeah.
Right. Very interesting.
He was charged with five counts of assault with a weapon and 5 counts of mischief interfering with property. And it looks like those charges were dropped, but that they went on the down low after that. So, and that seems like that's really related to more of a severe mental illness. And that's something the type of, people, those of us that work in incarceration settings or in mental hospitals or institutions, you do see sort of the use and engagement in fecal matter than you do anywhere else in the population. And that has to do with the mental state of the individual. So,
did you experience that a lot working in the prisons?
I did. In the prisons, that's a good transition. Thank you, Dr. Shyla.
Oh, you're welcome.
So in prison, the use of throwing bodily fluids, whether it is spit, urine, or fecal matter onto someone, using that as a weapon, is called gassing. Inmates, in my experience, don't generally do that to each other unless they're trying to cause like long-term harm. But usually it's a way of acting out against correctional staff. And there's sorry, this is a little bit gross, but like there's even techniques for making it worse. So they would take the materials, the bodily fluids and feces, and mix it with packets of jelly they would have gotten for meals, because adding the sugar to it would make it harder to clean off. So
they're using the weapons that they have.
Right. I mean, that is, and there's a historical precedent set for spit, urine, feces as weapons. I mean, even going back to ancient Greece and ancient Scythia, where they would dip their arrows into this kind of foul mixture and use it as poison. I mean, that's a long-acting poison, because this is, of course, way before antibiotics. So, if you get something that highly infectious in your system, you're screwed pretty much. And during the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong used it in the same way, making what they called punji sticks, which was bamboo or other types of wood that were sharpened into stakes, then hardened with fire, almost to a razor-type sharpness, and then coated with that mess. Be put into pits and booby traps, and pretty brutal. That's how it can be used as a weapon. So that would be for protest, as an act of violence. But also, I've worked on a mental health ward where, a really nice guy who's completely psychotic decides he wants to paint the inside of his cell, and he uses his feces, and he's, painting pictures like a toddler would with finger paints.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, not particularly nice to try. Not the easiest, not the easiest way to do an evaluation when you're in a cell trying to talk to them, though.
No. And it was just like toddler level. It wasn't like Da Vinci level, Sistine Chapel.
No, definitely.
Ceiling stuff.
Definitely not. So but now there's also a part of this that we talk about that kind of gets into sort of a paraphilia. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah. How you mentioned earlier, this sense almost of feeling like, is this exhibitionist too? Definitely. And I know it's my lens and how my brain works, but you have to think about like, what's the crossover here with some other disorders. And sometimes we think of these in terms of sexual disorders as well. And so I wanted to see what the crossover was here. When you mentioned exhibitionism, I thought about some of my sex offenders that I treated, like tons of them that got arrested for exhibitionism. The excuse they would always use was, I was just urinating in public. And, that was something that they knew was an easy have the stigma attached to it, like a sex offense. And it was kind of believable, right? I mean, you could say like, okay, if you're urinating in public because you had to go and the wrong person drives by and is offended by it and calls the cops, well, then regardless, you kind of created a victim. But my job was always, well, is the sexual arousal intent part there? Because if I get someone who is literally just peeing in public into sex offender treatment, it's not appropriate for them because they didn't have that malicious sexual intent. I can't treat them.
Right.
So, but then when they tell me that, and then I look at their rap sheet and they have 8 convictions for exhibitionism, I know they didn't get caught urinating in public 8 different times.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's something to consider. But aside from it, since we're on this topic anyway, I thought it would be a good time to sort of touch on coprophilia, because I don't know, I don't think I want to put it into some other episode and drag this out.
Yeah.
It just seemed like a good spot for
Let's get it over with.
Yeah, let's get it over with all in one shitstorm. So coprophilia is a paraphilia, which if you want to go back and listen to episode 5, we did all about paraphilias. And just as a reminder, paraphilias are abnormal sexual interests or attractions to, usually it's unusual objects, activities, or situations. And it needs to be coupled with some intense distress for the person. And that's why they usually seek out treatment and then get diagnosed. So copro comes from the Greek word for excrement. So that's where you get coprophilia. And it's not to be confused with coprophagia, which is usually a neurological or a side effect of a psychotic issue, where that's just essentially eating feces. We're talking about more of like sexual interest here with coprophilia. A lot of my information came from a great blog because I left all of my books at my office on this. So I knew where to find stuff, but I also found Dr. Mark Griffith's blog, which I will link in the show notes. He just has a great source of information, all the right books, all the right pieces on there for looking into this. It is, in the world of paraphilias, still very rare when we're looking at anything having to do with the sexual interest or arousal to feces. And that's there's been some psychologists out there and researchers who have broken it down a little bit more into what is really going on here. I look at it as this umbrella of just involving feces, no matter what the actual act or situation is. Dr. McCary in like the 60s said it was about the act of elimination. There's sexual arousal to actually having your bowel movement that is key for some people.
Right. And that's also very, Freudian, primal. And there's, people like just on a complete, like just basic physiology is there are nerve endings in your rectum, and children,
right.
We have a lot of, I think it's better probably today than it has, certainly better than, Victorian times, is like where we get the idea of anal retentive, the idea that someone is so afraid of experiencing that, and they find one area of their life where they can control, so they're retaining the movements within inside themselves. And
sure.
Because we live in such a Puritan society that doesn't talk about this stuff, it's like there's a reason that there's nerve endings there. It's so you can actually feel good when you've eliminated, which then, because it's good for you to eliminate and get that waste out of your body. There's a biological reason.
There's a reward system there, sort of.
Okay. I can't believe you just called it a reward system. I love that.
Hey, I'm just looking at this very cognitive behaviorally right now. But no, there have been accounts of, because this is probably the most common question I get asked around paraphilias is like, well, where does that come from? Like, how does someone get attracted to something so unusual? And there are paraphilias out there that we know are innate. The person is just born being attracted to what it is, but there's also something real to pairing, kind of having this reward system, but pairing behaviors and feelings to where they get entwined.
Yes.
And I read an account today of, I think it was an adolescent that was diagnosed with coprophilia, and he said that he was so grossed out by the act of having to use the restroom and have bowel movements and really high anxiety about it, that what he started doing when he went to the bathroom was masturbating at the same time, because then he was pairing like something pleasurable and it made it more tolerable, where he actually could go to the restroom and not be grossed out about it. But then now he's pairing sexual arousal with the smell of the feces.
Yeah.
So no. So then he has created this tie, this behavior, this sexual attraction that is being triggered. So yeah, that I know it's hard to listen to. It's some gross stuff today, but there are reasons to this. Let's see. I also, some specialists or researchers will say that it's about watching somebody who is having a bowel movement. It's about having that bowel movement being taken, done onto your part of the body, playing with it, masturbating with it. There is all sorts of acts that fall underneath the umbrella of coprophilia. To get real sort of psychoanalytic, according to really the book that I turned to, which is Sexual Deviance Theory, Assessment, and Treatment by Dr. Judith Milner and some of her colleagues. It's from 2008. But she talks about that a common psychoanalytic interpretation is that the excrement symbolically represents the penis, and that the presence of fecal matter serves as a defense against castration anxiety. So to me, that's just like, we all know psychoanalytic theory is not my thing necessarily. I think it's interesting to kind of see how you can make sense of that.
Like because I get that they're trying to conceptualize what that's about. They can, like, I remember, wasn't there was a Sex and the City episode where Carrie was dating this really hot, like, senator, and she was like, I don't know if it was urinating, or I think I was urinating.
It was urinating. It was golden showers he wanted.
But there are others that, like, are, like you were saying, that are coprophiliacs that, like, want to be, for a sense of whether it's degradation or domination.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly that can be linked into it. But yeah, it's complex, and I think that it probably takes a big conceptual umbrella to try and place it within where we can look at it from a paradigm and try and figure it out, because it's complex, right?
It's very complex. And did you know that allegedly, I don't know if we have to say allegedly because he's dead, and honestly, who gives a shit, but Adolf Hitler was an infamous coprophiliac.
That's all over the web. There's a lot of that. And who knows if that's true or not, but it is very well known that he was absolutely addicted to meth. And, meth will mess with if you have any underlying sexual paraphilias, crystal methamphetamine will enhance them to an exponential and harmful degree.
Yeah. They have writing, of course, these are other people's writings, by his ex-lover who alluded to it. And then in Greg Hallett's book called Hitler Was a British Agent, there's an entire chapter devoted to Hitler's sexuality. And they talk about him being sodomized and sexually abused early in life, but that he was a sadomasochist, into coprophilia, homosexuality. He liked to be verbally abused, slapped around, have his head urinated on, have his chest shat on. I love that term.
Shat upon.
Shat upon. And yeah, I just thought that was
we have
super
to
interesting. But
all hold that with a grain of salt, because obviously he was
sure.
a horrific excuse, waste of protoplasm for for a human being who at this point who can separate conjecture from fact.
Right. And also I want to, I don't know, take a step back and saying, if this doesn't cause whatever you're doing sexually, if it's not causing you distress, if everyone is safe and, not being harmed by it, I don't care what you're into. This is not a judgment on anyone, because honestly, it wouldn't even be diagnosable if it's not causing the person distress. Many people can go out there and engage in S&M, and tons of things would be diagnosed, air quotes, as paraphilias or disorders, and it doesn't fit the criteria because they're fine with it and it's not causing any problems in their lives. So just my little
No, I
caveat
mean,
on all of this.
that's, I guess my reply to it would be my only concern is that there's always the necessity of being careful in an act like that has to be even higher. Wow, I really did not think that we were going to go graphic, but let me just say this. I guess my concern here is that the possibility for infection in scat play would be pretty high, just because of the amount
Absolutely.
of microbes and parasites that human waste has. So you have to be very, very careful about that. But I agree. Once again, that's the definition of paraphilia, is that if it's not impairing or causing distress to the individual and it's not causing harm to anyone else, then right.
Sure. Yes, exactly. There are a few studies that look at it in terms, they looked at populations of other people with other paraphilias and then asked basically, had they ever been involved in this? So there was a small percentage of people involved in S&M. And then they looked at a small sample of zoophiliacs who admitted that, they had participated in some sort of coprophilia at some point. And if you remember, with paraphilias, usually they travel in threes. If you know about one that somebody has, they're usually going to fit the diagnosis or criteria for at least two others. So that doesn't surprise me, that maybe there's not enough people to do a study on with that population per se, but looking at other populations, people are like, oh yeah, I've tried that at some point. So yeah. But just with treatment, we kind of talked about causes like conditioning of behavior, or being innate in someone. Treatment wise, again, if it's not causing distress, the person isn't usually going to seek treatment. But if they do, usually cognitive behavioral therapy for sort of reshaping thoughts and behaviors and finding alternative behaviors that are less distressful, but still, finding a way in which they can have a fulfilling sexual life, is important, as well as going back to what you were saying about health concerns, making a safety plan. I mean, I've made safety plans with people with all sorts of different paraphilias where it's like, oh, you could really cause some damage doing that, or you need to think about your health and well-being in how you are getting off. And so that's always really important to do with
in all
folks.
seriousness, as clinicians, holding that space for individuals who want to address this and them having to have a safe space to come and talk about it is just so valuable.
Absolutely.
So there was,
no, I was just going to say, you can just see it in their face when it's like you're finally having that discussion that they've probably never told anyone about, and it's not phasing you. And you can just sit there and be with them in it.
You're right there. You're being present in a really, probably maybe one of the first times they've been able to share it with anyone.
Yeah.
So in wrapping up, I wanted to tell a couple of stories. And I don't want anybody to come away from this thinking that I have like a preoccupation with this particular subject. But a couple of things. The one thing I wanted to note is about using as a weapon, and this is very interesting that in many cases of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, when mothers are inducing illness in their children, one of the most common ways is using fecal matter in the PICC line. If they've gotten their children into the hospital, for these mystery infections, is that, they've been caught on camera. They've been found, discovered by nurses to be taking, minute amounts of feces and putting them into the IV lines, which is just, brutal because it's infecting the child even further. So again, certainly a mental health connection, using it as a weapon, using it as a tool to keep the subject sick, which is just very sad.
Yeah.
So on a lighter note, we had in the LA County Zoo for many years, we had a very famous gorilla years ago. His name was Caesar, and he was a silverback gorilla, and he had like a really amazing personality because very labile personality. Like sometimes he was really, super friendly and fun and playful, and sometimes he was just not having it with the people at the zoo at all. And he was really famous for throwing his feces at people across the divider at the zoo. And
do you think it was a protest?
He was like protesting people gawking at him. But the funny thing about Caesar is that he would be really sly about it. So he would, like, people got on to like finally like, okay, this is what he does, is he acts very nonchalant, and then he reaches around and he slowly picks up a piece, and then he runs at you and flings it really fast and then runs away. So it's like,
I love that.
Just hanging out, and then that little hand would creep back and grab some. So I thought that was funny. But my favorite shit story is, I have an author that I really, really, really admire, David Sedaris, brother of Amy Sedaris, the actress and performance artist. David is a prolific writer and has been for decades. And he started out in a genre of writing that I would call sort of absurdist magical realism. And very creative, very funny, and has had his own very interesting journey through life from a big Greek American family. But I went to a book signing at Vroman's in Pasadena years ago, and he did a reading, and then he opened up his reading by talking about that his luggage was lost. So before coming to the reading, he had to walk across the street to Target in order to buy a shirt. And he got into a conversation with one of the salespeople, and the young woman said, "Oh yeah, we have a problem with people shitting in the aisles all the time." And he said, like,
"Oh my God, how does
well,
that
no,
just
he
come
probably
up?"
prompted it, I'm sure, because he always does like to ask weird questions. Like, he has really great essays about, like, when he travels around the world, asking cab drivers what their Christmas traditions are, because they're so wildly different around the world. So I'm sure he brought this up, but he was really astounded by, like, the amount of, but, living in Southern California with the homeless population, we're kind of used to it, right? I mean, we know this is, unfortunately, that's just something that's going to happen.
I step over it every day.
I get up to have him sign my book, and he's taking time to talk to everybody. It's so great. And I said, "Hey, when I first moved here, I worked at the Tommy Hilfiger store on Rodeo in Beverly Hills, and we had this woman come in, this very rich woman who had a bunch of shopping bags, and she's like, 'Hey, I got to use the bathroom.' And our manager was like, 'Well, man, we don't have a public restroom. We can't let you because we don't have the insurance for it.' And the woman's face changed and said, 'Oh, okay, no problem. Well, let me do some shopping.' So she goes around and she picks out some, and this was like, the early 90s and late 80s, when there were like tons of pastels and sort of, thin stripes, sort of like summery materials. Yeah. So she picks out like a whole 6 shirts and slacks and skirts and all this stuff, probably several $1,000s worth of clothes. And she takes it into the dressing room. And then she comes out a little bit later. She's like, 'Thanks so much. Not going to buy anything today, but thank you.' So we go back, and she's piled all the clothes in the middle floor and left a huge steaming turd on top of all the clothes. It was just shocking, and it was so gross. And like, we were all arguing about who was going to clean it up. And I was telling telling David Sedaris this story, and his eyes were just like wide. He's like, "No, it didn't happen. What did she look like? Are you sure she was rich? What was she wearing?" I was like, "Well, she was really like, and she was like wearing really nice clothes." And he was so nice. He goes, "God, it's just amazing to me. She must have been so angry." So he signs the book, and I get home and I open it up, and he dedicated the book to Scott. Thanks for the shit story. All my love, David Sedaris. I mean, I will never give that book away. It's one of my favorite possessions. I'm gonna have to. We'll have to tweet at him to listen to this episode so he remembers me.
Yes, for sure. Oh my gosh. Well, through doing the research and reading all of this, I thought, I think majority of the time, it's very much a vandalism crime to me.
Well,
like it just fits in that box. And it's either about anger or envy or the ultimate fuck you. And if you don't have a spray paint can on you, what do you have? Or, what is going to be the grossest or really piss people off? And, I thought it was really interesting. I think you had sent me an article where there was a forensic psychologist in Birmingham City University who said he gets asked by cops about this a lot. And especially like a burglar will break into a house and defecate. And they'll be like, why are they doing this? And he always asks them, was it soft or was it hard?
Yeah.
And they're like, what? And he goes, well, if it's soft, it might be nervousness. It might be like a teenage vandal that broke in and just like had to go. Or if it's hard, it's somebody with a mission. They have a message to send. They're definitely like shitting right on the bed so you don't miss it. And I thought that's such a great
observation because it's so true. Especially tying it back to the medical issues of IBS, which tends to be more sort of non-solid elimination and so related to anxiety. Yeah, that's very interesting. Boy, who knew we'd be talking about that?
Yeah. Who knew? I know I read that article and I'm like, who knew a forensic psychologist would be stating that in an interview? But the places our jobs take us are kind of crazy. All right. Gosh, I hope we didn't gross you guys out too much. Let's see. I think we don't really obviously have anything coming up. Everything got postponed. Scott and I are just working and we'll be trying to figure out what we're doing for our next episode.
Yeah, and we're going to continue practicing our social distancing. I always love looking at the inspiring and lovely Dr. Shiloh's face while we record, but unfortunately we're not able to do that, and we hope everybody else is practicing safe distance. And please be careful, folks. We want everybody to stay healthy and whole, and we want your loved ones to stay healthy and whole. So take care of yourself and take care of each other and be kind.
And we'll see you next time on LA
Not So
Confidential.
Bye-bye. We'll see you next time.